Okay, we'd like to welcome everybody out to the Fabricator Stage. We've got a great presentation on Quartzite. I know no one has any issues with Quartzite, but this is a wonderful presentation. Mark and Scott are here, and they've got a great presentation to talk about this. Please ask questions. Mark and Scott, they know their stuff. Appreciate it, and I turn the time over to them.
Again, Blake. Again, I'm Mark Meriaux with the Natural Stone Institute. We represent any company involved in the natural stone industry, from quarriers to fabricators, restoration professionals, everybody in between, the machinery and equipment folks that are here at the show. And I'm here today with my friend Scott Higginbotham.
My microphone's not on. There you go. I'm very bad at karaoke. So I won't sing to you. But I'm Scott Higginbotham with Treat, and this is probably the 5th or 6th time we've talked about this, so hopefully you're all here to learn about Quartzite, what it is, what it's not, and answer some of your questions.
So I'll talk about some of the geology I went over. If you were here in that last session with the stone ID, we'll go into a brief coverage of some of the basic geology for natural stone. We'll talk about some of the strengths that Quartzite as a material has specifically, and challenges that make that many shops, I know you guys are probably sitting out there because you're having some issues. And to build upon that, we'll talk about best practices that I've learned, that Scott's learned from all the phone calls and people you talk to, and we'll look at some of the case studies that have been shared with both of us.
Yeah, this isn't new. I've been working on this at least 8 or 9 years.
Who is 100% comfortable dealing with all Quartzite? Who likes some varieties of Quartzite? Who has banned fabrication of Quartzite in our shop? We're not messing with it anymore. Good. I'm glad that everybody's at least in the middle.
Who's had a Quartzite tear out?
Who's had to remove a project? So first of all, I'll talk about what Quartzite is. The metamorphic rock. We talked in the last session about the basic formation, the varieties, the way it's formed, and so it's a metamorphic rock, but it's made up almost entirely of the mineral quartz. So when we're talking about initiatives like our silica safety issues in the Natural Stone booth this week, silica is present in a lot of natural stones, and Quartzite specifically is almost pure silica. So if you ever see that ground cut, polished, worked dry, you're putting your workers or yourself at risk. So in that metamorphosis process, Quartzite started out as grains of sand. Then under heat and compression, layer upon layer, it is compacted and bonds together and forms sandstone. Still very porous, very absorptive, but then under additional heat and pressure, that sandstone metamorphosizes into Quartzite. That heat and pressure allows crystals to form. Those grains of sand glue together effectively and grow. The crystals grow into the beautiful quartzites that we see and you guys get to fabricate. But there's no hard line of exactly when that material becomes a quartzite. So somewhere between that sandstone to quartzite is a transition, and different varieties of quartzite can have many different physical properties, including the strength and the absorption, which is one of the ones we're going to talk about today.
Sure. So when you get into the quartzites, starting out with intermediate, going through heat and pressure, the amount of heat and pressure you're going to get, it's going to form different types of quartzites. Your very porous rainbows, getting out into the robust. When it gets into the macabus, it starts to tighten up, gets down and completely crystallizes like the Taj Mahal. Well, in between all that, you have inconsistencies, right? And we'll go through what factories do for those inconsistencies. Some of it are going to be the size of the silica. The quartzite is going to have to have enough heat and pressure that silica will completely crystallize together without any voids. And unfortunately, a lot of times there are voids, and that's where some of the problems that you're experiencing are coming from.
And so graphically, like I described, these slides were put together by geologist Karen Kirk. Some of you may know her. She's written a lot of wonderful articles that are available for you to access through this website, usenaturalstone.org, which is one of our partner websites where we put together information that's helpful to end users and designers. But Karen, our geologist Karen Kirk, she put together these slides and these images to try and tell that story. In the last session where we were talking about stone ID, one of the big determinants to help you determine how a stone might perform, specifically in a countertop or flooring application, is the hardness. Is it going to be scratch resistant? How abrasion resistant is it? And then a second one would be the chemical resistance. So what I did with Denise, we used the Mohs hardness picks, which are a set of numbered picks along this scale from 1 to 8 that give you a relative scale to determine the hardness and how well that material, that natural stone, might hold up against abrasion or wear. There's also another part of that kit that we talked about, which was the acid test, that gives you a little basic insight into how acid resistant or acid sensitive a material might be. These are just some of the common quartzites we see out there sold in the marketplace. Kalikata, Macaubus, Taj Mahal, Blue Tahoe. And that one on the right, Fusion, that's in that family. I like to call those more hybrids because it's not a pure quartzite, it's not a pure marble, but you can see the swirling bands of minerals and colors within that material. It actually will contain some quartzitic material going through those patterns that will exhibit characteristics of a true quartzite. It may also contain bands of marble minerals, which will have marble-like performance. It may scratch, it may etch. This is normally an hour-plus session, so Scott and I are going to skip through some of this and get to it.
One of the questions people ask when you receive your slabs is, what is the process from when it was harvested, all right? Most of your quartzites are open pit quarries around the world. These items are blocked, they're resined, okay? They're acid washed. The acid is used to take out all the inorganic material that is not white or gray. It could be browns, orange, reds, etc., blacks. Then it's baked in oven. This is actually a slab oven, easy bake oven for slabs, if you will. So afterwards, it's going to be resined. It's going to be resin backed, all right? Every slab, every tile, every paver has 6 sides, right? No matter what it is. Now you've cut off one of the breathing points of one of those 6 points. So that's what leads to one of the problems. But after that, it's going to get transported to your slab supplier. So have you seen any problems? Obviously, moisture is probably the main thing we're going to talk about. We talked about the hardness. It's not just the scratching, how hard it is on your material, how long it sits in your bridge saw or what other saws, how long it takes to fabricate, right? And so that's part of it.
How many times you have to resharpen the blade or stop to do this or replace the blade or change blades. It's hard on your tooling. We get that. That's just a characteristic that is normal and customary for true quartzites. It's going to be hard on your tooling. There's lots of tooling guys. I don't know if many of them are here at this show, but we see them at this show and others. But they'll have varieties of their blades or polishing pads or tooling that is engineered to work specifically for those hard materials like quartzite.
Yeah, if you're looking at how many linear feet your shop can get when you're cutting marble versus a granite versus a quartzite, you're going to notice the difference. Not just the time under the saw, but how much you're having to repurchase equipment. So fragile and brittle. As you resin these, and these pieces are resin, they're put on a container, put on a gentry crane, put on a ship, unloaded a ship, then it gets to your shop. It gets banged around a lot. And with this, it can open up some of that resin and create more voids that were maybe somewhat closed in the beginning and now have opened up. We've seen voids and fissures in the face that you can't feel, you can't see because they're not on the surface. They're just below the surface. And they're so small sometimes you may not be able to see it. But when you put quartzite on the saw, how long does it take to turn dark? Not very long, right? So all that water that's in there, it's just marinating on your saw. It's soaking it in, And we're going to go into 2 issues. Some of the things we're going to talk about, this came up as it was a sealer issue. That was for staining after post-installation. The water that's causing these problems is already in the material. You're not even done fabricating it yet, all right? So time and dryness, you're going to hear us reiterate over and over and over. It's going to take more time to fabricate. If you can't schedule your customer and your GC and everyone else that it's going to take longer to dry out, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to be rushed to install. Where you are geographically, Sun Belt, Northeast, Northwest, Is it summer? Is it winter? Are you an outdoor shop, indoor shop? These all are considerations to dry it out.
I got a question for everybody. Fabricators out there, who is charging more when you have to fabricate or work with Quartzite? Good, 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 good. Why aren't the rest of you? It's hard on your tooling. It costs you more tooling. It may soak up water. You've got to let it sit for a day, maybe longer, in your shop. It's going to slow down all of your other processes. You need to charge accordingly for that. Right. When I'm giving this presentation to designers or specifiers, I tell them that too. Expect to pay more for these difficult to work with materials. Everything's not the same. You guys have the biggest challenge in our industry. Every material is unique and different, has different characteristics. Every layout's different. Every customer wants a different shape. Everybody wants a different color.
You didn't pick it, but you're in charge of it. That's the way it goes.
Then every installation has a through elevators, up all over the place. You guys have a unique challenge in getting these beautiful jobs created and installed, and I applaud you all for that, but charge accordingly for the work you're doing. Make sure the customers understand that it's not a simple job. You guys are doing some difficult work. We're assuming that a lot of you, I saw some hands, you are experiencing some of these issues with the quartzites in your shop. You mentioned the
So acid treatments. Those of you who don't know, when you put an acid on something to eat or inorganic matter, you have to neutralize it. If you don't neutralize acid, it doesn't self-neutralize itself. The next time it comes in contact with water, it's going to react again. Well, if that slab has been on the container, the next time it's going to touch water is when you put it on the saw. All right? So it's got to be neutralized. And that's nothing out of your hands. That's a supplier thing, right? The resining, the type of resin, how much resin's used can cause problems. The type of impregnating or penetrating sealers that are used can do different things. The adhesives, the epoxies that you're seaming it with can do different things. It's not one problem. It's a multitude of different things that can cause 8 out of 10 quartzite jobs to do one thing, 9 out of 10. Sometimes I know still talk to people who don't even know what this is talking about. And I'm like, well, do you cut intermediate quartzites all day long? And you've never had one darken? No. I consider yourself lucky, right?
Like I said, I'm going to skip through some of these. The clicker may do that for me. Anybody seen issues like this? I see some hands going up and heads nodding. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So when someone sends a picture in like this, the first thing you're going to think of is, wow, it's right around the sink. It's got to be coming in from water from the top. It's got to be coming from the underneath side and everything else. In actuality, that water was already in that slab. And it had to work its way through that resin and through that silica and everything else to get to a dry area. Water always goes to a drier area. You cannot beat it. It will always win. Well, that water that's in there, it's not clean drinking water. It has impurities in it, and it picks up impurities while it moves out. And that's why you'll see on this picture on the left, where is the open areas? On the cuts.
It's the cut edge.
The cut edge. The punch holes for the faucets, the edge. It's on both edges because you only have about this much room. You don't normally, you can, but you don't normally see this on the back edge because you've pushed that up against and you have a backsplash, so it's not open to air. Doesn't mean it can't happen, you just don't see it as much.
I mean, more pictures of the same, but as Scott alluded to, you've got multiple things going on here. That acid treatment, so on these white macaúbas and similar light-colored quartzites coming from Brazil, many of them are going through an acid bath process. Why? To make them more marketable.
They're not as
to
pretty when they
remove
come
some
out.
of the rust,
They need
the
some
other
makeup.
iron, ferrous minerals. They don't want them looking orange. Your customers don't want them looking orange and yellow. So they acid bathe them to remove, to eat away at some of those iron-based minerals. Discolorations give you a wider looking material that's more marketable. What that does, though, it leaves little microscopic voids where those iron used to live in that stone. It leaves that path for moisture to go through the stone. The other thing Scott mentioned, the resining and the mesh backing. A resin is not a sealer and a sealer is not a resin, but when a resin's applied, it does change the absorptive properties. So it's changing that surface layer on the top of the stone. Guess what that mesh and resin does on the bottom of the stone? It does the same thing. You've got layers. So those surfaces are much less likely to absorb, or that path that Scott was talking about.
And it's very inconsistent. You know, normally when you do a template, the right and left of the stove and the right and left of the sink, those are always the problem areas because that's what gets more used. This picture here with the stove, if I didn't know better, the first thing I would say is, well, they're frying something and it's
Cooking,
getting sloppy and it's going over the edges. But actually, that's the water that's in the slab trying to get out. This is an oil stain. This is a, hey, I left something on the, that's a stain, okay? That's not something. We get into the seams, right? You get into the seams, that water wants to come from both sides. Where does it meet? It meets at the seam. What's in the seam?
Adhesive.
Adhesive.
Whatever adhesive you guys
Right.
use. That can play a role, so
Yes.
you need to be very selective. Again, it may be a more expensive variety of adhesive that you use on quartzites,
Yeah.
something that's non-bleeding. And every
Yeah.
one of our adhesive manufacturers has versions and products that are non-bleeding that are designed for quartzite. Research, look into that, and do some tests in your shop before you run out and then they're in the field, or have your installers use the whatever it was,
Yeah, I
the
mean,
cheapest polyester you could buy in your shop that you use on everything. Don't do that.
I've collected over probably close to 100 sink cutouts of quartzite over the last 10 years, which I don't want. Didn't want one of them, all right? But you have to find this out. But also, when you buy a bundle, you may find that there may be some inconsistencies because you don't know if that was the middle of the block, the outside of the block, 2 blocks over, you don't know. Again, we've all heard that question on a new installation. No one's been in the kitchen.
We haven't used
Nothing's
our
been
kitchen
there.
at all yet.
I always tell people to call the police. Someone has broken in your house, stained your countertop, did not steal anything, and snuck out without being seen. That's not the case, all right? But the whole idea is these stains, this right here, going back to that,
Yeah.
you could say, well, was it an aardvark suction cup? Was it the guy's lunch cups? You have to go through your mind to figure it out, what these things are. But looking how there's 4 on that side, there's 2 over there, you can kind of look, it's fingerprints, it's footprints. You kind of have to be a detective to try to figure out what's causing this because, quite frankly, nobody wants to be upfront and honest with you.
Yeah, we're not going to comment on the vein match of this installation. I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
Why buy 3 slabs and you can buy 2, right? Yeah. I don't have seams in my house.
Yeah. But yeah, the adhesives, including the setting adhesives you use, can have an effect.
Yes.
Like if
Yes.
blobs of a low-grade silicone or even a latex-based silicone were used just for
Liquid
setting
nail.
this, liquid nail, it can soak through and create more permanent stains that are impossible to remove. So Scott, what are some of the things that these folks can do? Let's go back about 10 slides to help avoid these situations.
Pre-sealing is something that seems so odd. All right, I've worked for decades pre-sealing at quarries overseas, in slabs, dimensional stone, tiles. I prefer to do it that way. The more that I can seal on the front end, the better it does to transit and the less work you guys have to do. But the whole idea is pre-sealing it is like sunscreen, right? Giving that slab an extra opportunity knowing it's going to be in water. Give it a little bit of help, right? Next thing to do is dry, dry, dry. So once those are cut, what's the first thing that happens when you pull it off the saw? One of your workers goes over, they take it off, they put it on a cart. Immediately
Go to a polishing area.
they start polishing it. Well, what you're doing with that friction, and you're closing the pores. That resin is getting hot, it's melting, and you're closing the escape hatch of that water. So a good benefit is to pre-seal it, cut it, and this is where the extra days come in. It's not all on the back end. It could be on the front end. So let it breathe through. Take a grinding cup, grind off 2 or 3 inches around the edges, around the sink cutout, around the punch holes. Let that thing dry out.
And what you're doing when you do that, and he's saying remove that mesh, the backing.
Not the whole thing. You don't have to take
Yeah.
the entire slab off.
He said a couple inches. I've heard it's 6,
Yeah.
8 inches, as much as you can around those cut edges, back from cut edges and around any openings where you're going to do some finishing or processing. What that does is gives any trapped moisture an alternate path to get out.
Yeah, that rough edge
Give
on
it
the
a
bottom
chance.
is more porous, and the water's smart. It's going to go, oh, do I go through the polished side or do I go through the raw side? And if it comes out the bottom and darkens, it's not seen.
And then other things you can do is if you live in Florida where Scott is, you can just put the pieces out in the sun
Until
and
it
let
rains and gets wet again. But yeah, you can do that on a sunny day.
Sometimes in here in Georgia, many of you are from the region down here in the south. You can let them dry out naturally in the sun.
Heat
That works.
dryers, humidifiers.
Other parts of the country, we have members that have created custom areas using old Connex or shipping containers, put dehumidifiers or air conditioning systems into those, created extremely dry environments they roll these carts of these absorptive problematic materials. They roll the full carts in there with, separators or strips to allow airflow through there, fans within that dry environment to encourage that drying. Give that water a dry
time to dry out. You don't see a lot of these problems while it's in your shop, and that's unfortunate because you wouldn't let it leave your shop, right? We started seeing this a couple of weeks after installation, 30 days, 3 months. I've seen actually year and a half climate controlled apartment, nothing changes. Monday looks good, Friday looks like somebody put ager around all the corners. That's a long time for it to take water. Now, you can't take your customers, listen, it's got to dry out for a year. No, don't tell them that. But the whole idea is that these over here on the fab cart, right, they were caught.
This is what we expect you to see in your shop. Fresh off the saw, you see a little bleeding, a little discoloration.
Just put it on the fab table, boom, yeah, it's drying out. You can see that. The fissures on this one with the guy's hand, those fissures, that's where that water, it's just like an edge. You got your window cracked in a rainstorm.
It may also be where some of those iron minerals were in those veins.
They got eaten out, now there's voids.
Some voids in there where the staining is more likely to occur. See if it doesn't jump again. It skipped past it, but I mentioned using the correct adhesive.
That's right. It's important, and we can go over that later. But pre-sealing about a week before, and pre-sealing for quartzite is a lot of people pre-seal for everything, right? So what it does is that you can make up room because if you seal dry stone before it's cut wet, now you don't have to let it dry out. Hence the pre-seal, right? It's protecting it in your shop while it's in your hands. Letting it dry out. We say a few days. A few days might be a week in January or February where you're at. A moisture meter. How many of you own a moisture meter?
How much do they cost, Scott? A good one.
$60, $80. Don't go ahead $20 one, but you don't need a $1,000 one. So $60, $80. General is a great one, an HH880. It's got a humidifier, humidity, temperature, everything else. It's got pins. And all you can do is go around and you can find out where it's wet. Putting your hand on something and going like this, look, it's dry. That's not a moisture meter, okay? But that's what people do. Well, it was dry. I've actually seen stone that's dark and light, and you put a moisture meter on it, and it's wet where it's light and dry where it's dark. So sometimes it can fool you.
Eyes can trick you. I don't have it on this slide, but one of the biggest points we want to emphasize is knowing which materials to look out for. Which ones are you getting calls about are more problematic?
So anything we call in these slides intermediate quartzites, they all seem to have a color range. Anything that's whitish, opaquish, grayish, that's your culprit. Those are the ones. They didn't get enough heat or pressure. They're the ones that are close to, I hate to say this, marble-esque.
Well, they're still in that sandstone type of environment.
Yeah, they just didn't get enough heat and pressure.
They're still very loosely bonded together and have a lot of voids where
then when it comes out of fabrication, you seal it again, all right? And I'll go over that off stage, but we have a procedure. This white page we made, I got so many tired of writing.
What about like Taj Mahal? That's a quartzite, right?
Taj Mahal, some of the more crystal stuff, you don't see this as much. I have seen it some, but not in the numbers that you have in the other ones.
So that's further along on that development scale, that evolution scale.
It's much harder.
Much lower absorption, much more tightly compacted. So we don't expect you to see these staining issues on like a Taj Mahal. But the Macaúbas, I don't want to blame Brazil, but a lot of these light-colored stones like that are coming out of countries like Brazil.
These are new stones. Think about, we're talking about things that are 200 million, 100 million, 50 million years old, and they've been in the marketplace a decade. There's a lot of things out there that just because it became cool or faddish, you guys are stuck with it. Again, you don't pick the stone, your customer does, but you're stuck with the problems. And it's expensive. The margins are good on quartzite. The revenue's good on quartzite, but if you go back to a house twice, how much money did you make? Sometimes you go back once, you made no money. How many of you here are just philanthropists and you do this for fun? All right? Okay? So you need to charge more. It's going to take more time. Have some patience. Have your clients have patience.
We've got loads and loads of more pictures. These were from our friend Greg, GMR.
I made this years ago I have a Dropbox with like 600 quartzite problems. I had to pick 6 or 7 of them to put in here. But the whole idea is we send this out because It's hard to explain this to the customer.
How did I do that?
You were the last person to touch that beautiful slab that they picked out. Look what you did to it, right?
So another issue, I pointed out that these materials might contain some iron or ferrous minerals in them. And they go through the acid bath to remove some of them. They don't get them all. They may get some at that surface layer, but sometimes in wet areas, or if they weren't fully dried out over a period of time, if that wasn't neutralized, you may see some yellow staining. What that's telling me is in these pictures, there is still some of that ferrous minerals in there, the iron that'll turn that yellowish color that's in there. There are rust removers, other chemical products that can help you
with it, yeah.
Neutralize or remove those. These are just more case studies.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites. Go back. I mean, what's wrong with that slab? I mean, you know, you can see where the fissures and the cracks and the water just followed it, almost like a broken windshield, you know? Sometimes you get lines. Sometimes you get the suction cut marks. Sometimes you get dry spots, which they're actually lighter spots. So all these things are, you know, there's not an answer. I know a lot of you were coming here and you were going to say if you stand on one leg and do this, then you'd have no problem with quartzites. But you just have to let it dry out, give it time, and cross your fingers.
We had a bunch more pictures. I skipped through them because I want to have time for you guys' questions. Anybody have some questions about specific to quartzite or other natural stones or sealing? Bonnie.
Like when you have a quartzite like at a sink for the cutouts, and how do you dry that out in a customer's home and then go back and seal it to make sure?
First you call a licensed plumber, right?
Yes.
All right. So everyone's doing bottom mount sinks. Nobody's doing drop-ins anymore. One of the most important things to do, and I tell all fabricators when I'm doing training, make sure you seal the underneath side of the sink, the holes, and around the stove. Because if liquids run down and get on the bottom, they will bloom back up. They didn't come from the top, they're coming from the bottom. It takes all of a couple of seconds to run it around the edges or run around the sink. But those are the little things that are sometimes missed, and that's why sealing in a shop is always more important than your installers doing it, but that's another conversation.
But if you didn't adequately dry that stone before install, there still may be some trapped moisture in it. It's going to work its way to the path of least resistance, which is usually going to be that cut edge.
That opening on the sink that hangs over, and again, there's no one here to say that it's not water bouncing off the sink and coming up, or just water sitting on the top and running over. I mean, I have kids. They're like water buffaloes when they wash their hands and stuff, and sometimes that water doesn't get removed, but it could be coming up or it could just be exiting the stone.
Let's get another question
Another question.
You touched base on it a little bit, but with the different types of quartzite, because of how it's made, like some get more heat, some get more pressure. I've noticed like with suppliers that sometimes, like for example, Ocean Blue, it would be a quartzite, but some might classify it as a hard marble. How can you differentiate those?
So were you here for the last session we just did? You missed it. We did a stone identification session. A great kit available from MB Stone Pro that tests just some basic tests you can do, and you can do absorption on your own just by. But that kit includes an acid test. Acid will tell you the mineral makeup of the stone, if it's siliceous, like a true quartzite would be, or if it's calcium-based, like most marbles would be. If it's acid sensitive, it's going to fall in that marble family. So you can do some tests on your own to determine that. If it's unresponsive to acids, it's indicative that it's more likely going to be in quartzite. And I'm not an encyclopedia of stone. I don't know every variety. I can't keep up. They keep
There's
digging
no
more
such
stuff.
thing as soft quartzite, okay? That doesn't exist.
Yeah, thanks for that.
And I'll hit you in the head with one if you think it's soft, all right?
A few more questions.
You mentioned the stones already come from the suppliers already, like without the acid treated. We are fabricators, but receive a lot of containers directly from those countries. So as a fabricator, how can we do to like neutralize those acids on those quartzites?
If they didn't fully neutralize that, it's very simple household.
Baking soda and water, but it's going to be tough because, again, you don't want to be marinating in baking soda, high alkaline water, because that's going to cause a problem. It's all about your relationship with your suppliers and putting a little pressure on your suppliers, to be completely honest.
Sometimes we do these sessions, I ask fabricator, and somebody raise their hand and goes, I've never had a problem.
Yeah.
So some
They'll call me next
varieties
week.
that are coming in are correctly neutralized. The fabrication's getting done without the issues that many of us are seeing, and they're not seeing these problems. But we're trying to gather more information. We don't know everything. You're still working on it. I'm still
I
working
learn
on
something
it.
every day. If you don't learn something every day, stay in bed. And the whole idea is that there's not one solution. This is a challenge that our industry has been given because of the design and the want for a desired material. How many of you sell quartzite because you tell them it's harder than granite? Thank you. Oh, you do? Okay, well, thank you anyway. But the whole idea is you're not scratching granite. It's hard on your tools, but the hardness is great. That's positive. But there's other issues that this material that you have to be aware of, your clients have to be aware of, and that's all you can give them.
Any other questions, Blake? Got one in the back?
So y'all mentioned something about the fiberglass backing. A lot of times when we're going through the fabrication process, we're only taking off, a half inch, very little. What is the benefit to taking the rest of that off? Are you saying that makes it easier for that moisture?
Letting it breathe. You're
Yeah.
letting an escape route for that moisture to get out of there.
As Scott pointed, the moisture is going to go from the wetter area towards the drier area. If the only drier path is that saw cut edge, then it'll go straight to that saw cut edge, and you'll see
Yeah.
that as discoloration.
Yeah, 'cause that
If
water
you
will go
remove
down.
that, if you remove that mesh backing, if you're using a CNC, you're probably using a calibration wheel. So if you get 2 or 3 inches right there, just calibrating the thickness, you may remove that mesh. I'm going to encourage you to maybe go back 5, 6, 7, 8 inches with a stubbing wheel, or they make specialty cups to remove the mesh. Give that an open surface, an open path to escape through that bottom layer.
Because that moisture is going to go down till it hits that fiberglass, and then it'll run that fiberglass till it hits that open edge.
Any other questions?
Where are you at the show, Scott? Tell everybody if they
Standing
want
right
to
in
come
front of you,
ask
Mark.
you some more questions.
So we're 4758. Chris, what's our booth number? 74. See, neither one of us know where our booth is. 7448. Right. We're right behind Stone Peak, but we have an anti-etch for marble. That's a whole nother discussion. But if you want more details, I'd be happy to answer them. You can show me your bad pictures, and I'll show you mine, and we'll see if we can figure out how to fix the problem.
And when I'm not on stage here, I'll be in the Natural Stone Institute booth right next door. Come see me if you have any more questions about natural stone or membership.
Perfect. Let's give Mark and Scott a round of applause. Thank you. So we're going to be back. We'll be back here at noon for porcelain practicalities, discussion on porcelain practicalities. Don't forget to visit the Natural Stone Institute booth, the Rockhead booth, ISFA booth, all great assets to help and grow your business. Thank you.